Now there is a lot of jutsus in Naruto, specifically more than 2,000 between the novels, the manga, and the anime. But just because there is a lot of jutsus in the show doesn't mean they're all being used. The majority of those jutsus in that 2,000 have only been used once. And that's because there's really only 15 to 20 or so jutsus that get used repeatedly. This is for a myriad of reasons. One, recognizability is big in anime. Think Yusuke Spirit Gun or Zoro's Three Swords style. People like what they know. Two, animators don't like drawing a bunch of different jutsus because then you have to think of something new every single week. And three, when you nail it, you nail it. Some jutsus are just inherently cooler than others. Obviously, some of the big jutsus we know are Rasengan, Chidori, Susanoo, anything related to a Sharingan. But there is truly one jutsu used more than any other jutsu in the entirety of Naruto as a show, manga, or light novel, and that's the Shadow Clone. However, this is ironic considering the fact that the Shadow Clone is actually a kinjutsu, meaning its use is technically forbidden.
But Nick, if shadow clones are forbidden, why are people forced to create them in the Ninja Academy?
Well, there's actually an answer to that you might not quite expect. But before we get to turning your guys' world upside down, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you guys have been subscribed here for a while and you've ever wondered what more could I do to support Nick as a content creator, well, I have a really easy answer for you, and it doesn't cost you money. I have two other YouTube pages. One is called NC Gamer 23, where instead of explaining anime, I play video games. This page is kind of a passion project of mine that I'm really enjoying, and we're just about to hit 10,000 subscribers on it. If you guys could help me achieve my dream of being bigger than Jacksepticeye, well, that'd be great. There's also Hammer's Collection, where instead of explaining anime, I just build massive statues from it. And if we hit 10,000 subscribers on Hammer's Collection the day that this video is posted, I will be giving away a statue of this size. All you gotta do is follow Hammer's Collection and join the Discord in my description. Once you're in that Discord, go into the statue giveaway text channel. And once you're in that channel, just say hi. I'll be picking someone at random from that channel. But if you're not subscribed to Hammer's Collection and I pick you, well, I'm moving to the next person. And if you send more than one message, well, you'll be disqualified. But enough about that, let's get to the video. Before we get into all that, guys, we gotta talk about today's sponsor, Buyee. You see, Buyee is a Japanese auction and shopping service. That sounds complicated. Why do you need it? You ever been looking to buy something from Japan, but everything's so expensive? Well, that's because usually you're looking at American companies selling Japanese goods. And since there's a middleman, they hike up the prices. Buyee allows you to put bids on Japanese e-commerce websites and have those products sent all the way from Japan directly to your house with no middleman. But it's a Japanese website. Is it all going to be in Japanese? Is it going to be hard to use? Well, actually, no to both those questions. It's A, incredibly easy to use, and B, available in a plethora of different languages. And on top of that, they ship all across the world: Oceania, Europe, North America. And on top of that, they have over a half dozen international shipping methods and a plethora of different payment methods. You can pay with PayPal, Visa, Alipay, all of it. And if that wasn't crazy enough, Buyee is also giving you a free 2,000 yen coupon for signing up with my link in my description and my pinned comment. But if you want even more money off your order, Buyee is doing a campaign with one of their Japanese e-commerce websites right now, specifically Mercari. Using the second link in my description and pinned comment, you can get access to a 5,000 yen international shipping coupon. This coupon is for Mercari first-time users only and is available between July 11th and 31st. And you better believe it can be stacked with that previous 2,000 yen coupon. So what are you waiting for? There's a Pokemon card, an Android, or video game out there waiting for you. So Shadow Clones, one of the most used jutsus in the entirety of Naruto, and yet we seem to know very little about them. If they're forbidden, why do people have to use them to graduate from the Ninja Academy? What release are they? How did Rock Lee pass the ninja exam? And most importantly, why are they forbidden? Well, let's start these videos in the way that we always start these videos, at the beginning. You see, Shadow Clones were created by Tobirama Senju during the Warring States period. Tobirama was a genius, and he created Flying Raijin, Edo Tensei, and Shadow Clones to more efficiently murder Uchihas. And Izuna can confirm to you that he was successful in this efficiency. So in premise, the Shadow Clone Jutsu is very straightforward. Essentially, it allows the user to create copies of themselves. However, it's a bit more complicated than that, because in essence, when you break down what a Shadow Clone is, it's essentially yin-yang jutsu. And for those of you who don't know what yin-yang is, I'll go over it briefly, but I have a longer description right here. You see, yin-yang technique is essentially creating something out of your imagination with chakra. A prime example of this is Izanagi. By activating Izanagi, an Uchiha is essentially able to rewrite the reality around them, destroy the body that they're in, and create another body entirely made out of chakra. Essentially, anything in their immediate vicinity can be warped by their imagination after using chakra to create that image. And since yin-yang release is inherently the combination of yin release and yang release, let's quickly go over those two as well. You see, yin releases things like genjutsu. It's making something appear to exist out of chakra, or altering a non-physical form with chakra. Think shadow stitching. While yang release is enhancing physical objects with your chakra. Think the Akamichi partial expansion jutsu. So when you combine these two things into yin-yang release, you have the ability to create physical things out of your imagination in chakra. While shadow clones have never specifically been called yin-yang release, they fall directly into that category because you are making a physical clone that looks just like you out of chakra. That is the definition of yin-yang release, which, mind you, is limited to things like Kekemora, which is the sword of Ninabuko, Ashal killing bone, and Izanagi, outrageously high-level jutsu. And yet, almost every single ninja we know can use shadow clones. But why is this? Why is this the one yin-yang release that everybody has access to? I actually have a theory about this. You see, other yin-yang releases like Izanagi or like the sword of Ninabuko or other Kekemora are high level because they differentiate themselves from shadow clones. And how they differentiate themselves is imagination. Take Izanagi, for example. There is an incredible amount of imagination brought into Izanagi. You not only have to imagine a sword not being stabbed through your heart, you also have to imagine destroying your current body and creating a new one far away from you. And while this may sound a bit like a shadow clone, it's different. Because in this process, you not only have to dismantle yourself, you have to make yourself whole somewhere else. While with a shadow clone, you are simply making a carbon copy of yourself to your side, in front of you, behind you, you get it. And this lacks the imagination that something like Izanagi or Kekemora would require. But that's just the theory, and a thin one at that. So now that we've touched on who created it and what release it might be, I guess we should address the why. I mean, obviously Tobirama made it to more efficiently kill Uchihas, right? But if you actually go beyond the scope of the joke, it makes a lot of sense that it was Tobirama Senju who created the shadow clone technique. To break down that theory, we're gonna have to explain exactly what the shadow clone technique does and how it's used. See, the reason that the shadow clone technique is forbidden is because every single clone you take takes an even split of your chakra. If I create one clone and he just chills with me right next to me, he has half of my chakra. If I create 3 clones, we are each holding 1/4 of my chakra. Now, having 1/4 of my chakra isn't the worst thing of all time. I may not be able to pull off some of my more insane jutsus, but I'll still be alive. The problem becomes when you have, I don't know, 10 clones, 100 clones, 1,000 clones. Having 1/100th of your original chakra is like running your phone on 1% battery and thinking you're gonna get through this game of Clash Royale. And as we've seen with both Nagato and Kakashi, when you run out of chakra, you're done. You literally die, which is why the multi-shadow clone technique is forbidden. Regular shadow clone technique is not kinjutsu. This is a massive misunderstanding in the Naruto community. Shadow clones are allowed. In fact, most jonin use them. It's the use of multi-shadow clone jutsu which makes hundreds or even more shadow clones, which is not allowed. Because once again, you will not operate on 1% or even less of your own chakra without dying pretty quickly. Also, a bunch of clones with only 1% of your chakra are pretty useless. This is why almost every other person in the show outside of Naruto only ever uses 3 shadow clones max. But of all the people to create this jutsu, why Tobirama? Well, yes, obviously he was a genius, and yes, obviously he wanted to kill as many Uchiha as possible. But there's more to it than the joke. See, Tobirama was a Senju, and a very powerful one at that. And as the Senju were descendants of Ashura, they were blessed with higher chakra reserves. Because when Hagoromo died, he gave his son Indra his dojutsu, and his son Ashura his chakra, his life force. Because of this, Senju have a naturally higher life force, aka life expectancy, and chakra reserves. So it makes a lot of sense that the person who would be able to create and then substantiate a jutsu that splits up their chakra into thirds would be a person with high chakra reserves. And this is why Tobirama was able to do it. Because Tobirama, mind you, was able to pull off flying Raijin, which is incredibly chakra depletive. So Tobirama, in an attempt to overcome the visual prowess of the Sharingan Dojutsu's ability to track his movements, decided to increase the number of him to overwhelm it. Yes, obviously a well-trained Sharingan user can deal with shadow clones. We've seen Sasuke do it multiple times. But obviously it is more difficult than dealing with just one person. And as a Senju, having a third of his chakra really wasn't that big of an issue, and having two people with a third of his chakra also was a big plus. On top of that, there's the surprise factor. Well, what do I mean by that? Everybody knows what shadow clones are. How are you gonna surprise somebody with them? Well, shadow clones didn't always exist. However, something else did. The just standard clone technique. You see, what you see kids in the Ninja Academy pull off is not a shadow clone. It's just a clone. It's very vastly different, but never painted out in a meaningful and informative way in Naruto. But that's why I get the big bucks. You see, Sakura and Naruto and Sasuke weren't all busting out shadow clones in the Ninja Academy. And the key difference between the clone technique and the shadow clone technique is physicality. Regular clones technically have no physical form. They're just kind of a projection. And in this regard, the clone technique falls into the yin category. Essentially, you are using your chakra to make a projection that has no physical shape and therefore is technically not there. Regular clones also technically don't have the ability to move on their own. They just do whatever you're doing, except for in the case of Naruto when they were like on the ground and Naruto was standing up. It's actually technically a more impressive feat to make a clone that doesn't look like you, but it's also technically less helpful in combat, and I'll explain why. You see, if you were to punch a regular clone, nothing would happen. Clone has no physical form. Your fist would just go straight through it. So it wouldn't fly back and explode into a puff of smoke like a shadow clone. It would just punch air and light. And because of this, the clone technique has been used for diversions for thousands of years. You see, the clone technique is a bit like the body flicker technique in a way. The body flicker technique is a technique made famous by Shisui, but a lot of other people use it, where one moves so fast that they leave physical after images all around the battlefield. And this is dangerous for somebody you're fighting because you don't know which person is the real person. Essentially, the clone technique is used the same way in combat. You do the clone technique, you make 2 or 3 clones and you run at somebody. That way the person you're running at has no idea which person is the real person. This is why the ninja exam requires you to make that clone look as much like yourself as possible. Because obviously, if you're running with a clone that's 6 inches taller than you should be, they're gonna find out which person is the real person. But the thing is, technically, even if you do create the perfect clone, there's ways to find out which person is the real person. Let's say I've made a clone and I'm running at you with my clone to my left. Mind you, my clone has to mimic everything I do. It can't independently move. So in movements, there's gonna be absolutely no way you can discern which of us is real. And let's assume for this exercise, you don't have Byakugan or Sharingan. Do you know how you could identify which of us was the real person? Pause the video right now, enter your answer. I'm waiting. I'm not kidding. Stop it. Okay, everyone's answers in. Remember that the clone has no physical shape. Therefore, nothing that the clone touches will be disturbed. The dust under its shoes will not be kicked up. The leaves it hit will not rustle. And this will only happen with the physical person using the clone technique. So in combat, all throughout the Warring States period, the clone technique had been used to distract enemies while the original person tries to go for a killing blow. So by the time that the shadow clone was created, people were very well versed with the clone technique. However, obviously the clone technique wouldn't work on somebody with the Sharingan, because even though the Sharingan can't track chakra as well as the Byakugan, it can still track chakra. So you would be able to see which person was which, and then you would know you could ignore the other clones and attack just that one person. Now imagine somebody's running at you with what you believe is the clone technique. You're confused because you know they know you have a Sharingan and you know they know that you can see through clone technique. However, all of these clones chakra-wise look identical. Even the Byakugan, we learned this in Naruto versus Neji's fight, can't discern between the actual person using shadow clones and the shadow clone. But this is only even in the circumstance that you look at the chakra natures. Most people would probably just assume that Tobirama got desperate and is trying to use a childish technique. And as you go for the person who you believe is correct, you get stabbed by the other clone who is holding a physical kunai. I genuinely believe this is why Tobirama created the shadow clone, because he had the chakra reserves to split up and the surprise factor of differentiating the clone technique. But there also might be another reason Tobirama created the shadow clone technique. You see, I've already said it in this video, Tobirama was a genius when it came to creating jutsus. But if one wants to create jutsus, a lot of research has to be done, especially when you are basing it off basically nothing. Like, what is Edo Tensei based off of? nothing. But only having one person to do all of this research is a big ask, even for a genius. So what if you could have multiple people doing research at the same time? Well, that's great and all, but technically those are still different people doing research, and then all of those people would have to come together with all of the research they've found and then work together collaboratively to make that research a jutsu. And it's not super easy to maintain shadow clones for so long that you can collaborate with them and find independent ideas. That's where the sneakiest part of shadow clones comes in useful. You see, chakra is the life force that binds all living beings in Naruto. And chakra technically cannot be destroyed unless we're talking about Baryon mode. So when your shadow clone disappears, do you lose half of the chakra that was in that shadow clone? No, you don't. In fact, every shadow clone you lose as they explode, all of their chakra and all of the experience, and that's the most important part here, comes back to you. What do I mean by experience? Let's think about this simply. Let's say I make a shadow clone and he goes to do Duolingo Spanish for the day, and he learns that hi in Spanish is hola. Then let's say that shadow clone is walking down the street later today and gets absolutely smoked by a truck coon. Not only do I get half of my chakra back because that shadow clone's dead, I also learn that the word for hello in Spanish is hola. This applies to more things than just education. If my shadow clone had learned how to land a spinning back kick consistently, I would then learn that. So essentially, Tobirama has made worker drones of himself that can either go do research or combat for him, and everything that they learn in either physical combat or from books, once they die, will come back to him. I believe it was John Haywood who said, "Many hands makes light work." Technically, it was a Greek before him, and then it was translated into a story in the 1300s in English, and then it was involved in a book of Proverbs by John Haywood in the 1500s, but you don't have to worry about that. So now Tobirama has made clones that are A, physical, B, a surprise to those who have never seen them before, and C, can help him learn new things. And the only way that these clones can be differentiated from the user is if the person you're fighting has a Rinnegan. We learned from Madara that he was able to tell which people are shadow clones and which people are the original user with the use of his Rinnegan. But those are really rare. On top of this, every shadow clone created shares the memory of the users. So every shadow clone you create would react to any circumstance you encounter in the exact way that you, the user, would react. If you and your shadow clone were walking down the street and you both saw a little girl being held at gunpoint for her pocket watch, I don't know, apparently you're walking through Gotham, you would both react in the same way to that situation, whether that being not my problem or sticking up for the girl. And what's even crazier than that is because shadow clones have their own jutsus and technically their own free will, they can create more shadow clones. Yes, shadow clones can make more shadow clones, but that chakra doesn't come from the user, it now comes from the shadow clone. So let's say I made a shadow clone, and then that shadow clone made another shadow clone. I would have half of my original chakra, and my shadow clone and his shadow clone would both have a fourth of my original chakra. But because all shadow clones are kind of people with their own chakra, that means they're also kind of linked. What does that mean? Well, all shadow clones maintain a small link between each other, that's between shadow clones and the original caster of shadow clones, meaning that every shadow clone you create is going to be connected with their own chakra. This connection of chakra is done in order to make sure that the caster of shadow clones is able to get control over a shadow clone should they lose control. Because remember, shadow clones are basically just people with their own free will, and even though they are basically just copies of you, that doesn't mean they can't be placed under genjutsu and things like that. So by maintaining a small chakra connection between all shadow clones and the user of shadow clones, you can re-establish control of any clones that have gone wild. However, this connection can work against you. This means that sometimes pain felt by one of the shadow clones or the user of shadow clones can be felt by everyone. This was the circumstance when Naruto was hurt by Kurama's chakra and all of his shadow clones felt it. That link goes beyond physical connection. Technically, most people who use shadow clones know exactly what their shadow clones are up to. We saw in the novelization of the Boruto movie that Naruto knew exactly what each and every single one of his clones was doing around Konoha, and this allowed him to maintain conversations on different sides of the city at once. He could be talking to a reporter on one side of the city and be talking to city planners on the other, because remember, Naruto's shadow clones are basically just him. The only problem is if Naruto is doing something himself that requires him to concentrate, this puts a strain on him. Imagine trying to watch 5 TV shows all at once. That's what it's like having 5 shadow clones out there doing work for Konoha. But you can say you don't have to necessarily tap into what the shadow clones are doing, and you're correct there. But now try and write an essay while you have 5 TV shows on, all yelling at you at once. And this puts a lot of strain on Naruto, which brings us to the second way that shadow clones can disappear. Obviously, if shadow clones are punched hard enough, they can disappear. Even though there's been times when shadow clones have been hit or stabbed or something like that, and remain. The second way that they disappear is if that the user either runs out of chakra or is too strained. This is what we saw when Naruto was carrying Himawari's cake. I still cannot believe they made him do that. The Naruto I know would have been there for Himawari. But as soon as Naruto's concentration falters, then the shadow clones disperse. And this is actually kind of nice for Naruto because the second those shadow clones disperse, not only does he get all of the information that they know, he also gets that chakra back, which is kind of like catching your second wind. So that must be nice at least. Lastly, since we're talking about Naruto, we should talk about how shadow clones helped him achieve things in a timeline that wouldn't be accessible to anybody else. So we know Naruto is the only person who's able to use the multi-shadow clone jutsu because he has Kurama's chakra to tap into, right? Well, Kakashi said that a person can achieve 2 hours of training in 1 hour if they train side by side with a shadow clone. This is because there's 2 of you doing 1 hour of training, therefore it stacks. The reason Naruto can learn things like the Rasen Shuriken so quickly is because he can do this 2-person stack with 100 people, which means he can achieve 100 hours of training in 1 hour, which significantly expedites the process of training. It just requires a massive amount of chakra, which has never really been a problem for Naruto. And yeah, that's it. Basically everything you need to know about shadow clones and how they differ from, oh wait, why was Rock Lee able to graduate the Ninja Academy? So we've established already that to graduate the Ninja Academy, you don't need to use the shadow clone technique, you need to use the clone technique. But even just using the clone technique requires you to be able to mold chakra. So if Rock Lee can't mold chakra and therefore can't use ninjutsu, why was he able to become a Genin? Was he able to just pull off the clone technique that one time? Is he actually a secret ninjutsu genius who's nerfing himself by not using it? Nope. We actually learned how Rock Lee graduated from the Ninja Academy in Rock Lee and his Ninja Pals. And he actually uses the Shadow Clone technique to graduate from the Ninja Academy. I'm not kidding. He uses the Shadow Clone technique. Just the Shadow Clone technique specific to Rock Lee, where he runs around so fast it leaves physical after images. So body flicker technique, basically. But in Rock Lee and his Ninja Pals, they call it Shadow Clone Jutsu Rock Lee Edition. So you could say Rock Lee technically cheated to get through the Ninja Academy, or you could say he figured out body flicker about the same age as Shisui and nobody ever gave him his credit for it. But don't make the same mistake as Rock Lee's Ninja Pals, guys, and go ahead and give me my credits by liking this video, subscribing to the page, and hitting that noti bell. Listen, if I had shadow clones, one of them would do my live streams, one of them would film my YouTubes, one of them would film my TikToks, and then I would sleep for 3 years straight.